Today, we're going to deconstruct a really powerful and honestly destructive psychological tactic that you might have come across without even knowing what it's called. It's known as DARVO.
So, let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to bring up a totally valid issue with someone, but by the end of the conversation, you're the one feeling confused, you're feeling guilty, and somehow you're the one saying sorry? That whole disorienting experience? Well, it's often not an accident. It's a strategy.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to cover exactly what DARVO is, and then we'll break down its 3 predictable steps. After that, we'll get into the psychological engine that makes it all work, something called projection. We'll also look at the very real, very serious consequences for victims. And finally, we'll see why this creates a cycle that feels impossible to break. Okay, let's get right into it. What in the world is DARVO?
So, DARVO is an acronym. It stands for deny, attack, and then reverse victim and defender. And this isn't just some random argument that gets out of hand. Oh no, it is a specific, repeatable pattern of manipulation. You can almost think of it as a tool that an offender uses to completely warp reality and dodge any and all accountability.
From a psychological standpoint, DARVO is a defense mechanism. It's all about protecting a very fragile, very grandiose self-image, what clinicians sometimes call the false self. For people with narcissistic traits, admitting they did something wrong can feel like an existential threat. It's like their whole identity is about to crumble. So this tactic just deploys automatically to shield them from that feeling of shame. So how does this actually play out? Well, once you know what to look for, DARVO unfolds in a sequence that is just alarmingly predictable. It's really a 3-step process. First, they deny. If that doesn't shut things down, they attack. And the grand finale? They completely reverse the roles of victim and offender. Let's dig into each one. The very first response you'll get when you confront them is always denial. And we're not talking about a soft, oh, I don't remember it that way kind of denial. This is a hard-line, absolute rejection of what you're saying, of your reality. You're going to hear things like, that never happened, or you're just making things up. The goal here is to instantly make you question your own perception. It doesn't matter if you have receipts, if you have screenshots, whatever. The denial will be absolute because its real purpose isn't to debate facts, it's to protect the abuser from feeling any shame. Now, if that wall of denial isn't enough to make you back down, the dynamic shifts instantly. The best defense, in their mind, becomes a really brutal offense. And notice what's happening here. The conversation is no longer about their behavior. Suddenly, it's all about your character. They start throwing accusations. You're crazy, you're just trying to control me. This often comes with this explosive burst of anger, what's known as narcissistic rage, and it's really designed to intimidate you into silence. And that brings us to the final and I'd say most damaging step in the whole process, the complete role reversal. This is where the offender literally rewrites the script of what just happened, and they cast themselves as the person who's been wronged. This is where they become the martyr. You'll hear these classic lines like, after everything I do for you, or I'm trying so hard and all you do is attack me. And just like that, in a flash, the abuser is now the victim, and you, the actual victim, you're suddenly the bad guy. The whole point is to make you feel overwhelmingly guilty and confused. Let's walk through a quick case study to see it all in action. So imagine you confront your partner about some suspicious messages you found. Phase 1, they deny. It's just a work thing, you're being paranoid. You press on, maybe you show them proof. Phase 2, they attack. You're so controlling. And finally, when you express how hurt you are, they hit you with the reversal. You know what? I'm tired of your distrust. You are the one destroying this relationship. And what happens? So often, the person who brought up the concern ends up apologizing just to keep the peace. So what is the psychological engine that drives this entire tactic? Well, it's a really powerful defense mechanism you've probably heard of, called projection. Projection is basically when a person takes all their own unacceptable qualities, their flaws, their bad habits, their ugly behaviors, and instead of owning them, they accuse someone else of having them. It's like a psychological game of hot potato, offloading their own internal shame and guilt onto somebody else. And once you see it, the pattern is just unmistakable. The person who is constantly dishonest accuses their partner of being a liar. The one who is always flirting for validation will call their partner irrationally jealous. The person who neglects their own responsibilities will call the other person lazy. The victim, in a sense, becomes this distorted mirror, reflecting back all the things the abuser can't stand about themselves.
So it's no surprise that being on the receiving end of this kind of constant manipulation takes a just devastating psychological toll.
When you're exposed to DARVO over and over, it systematically erodes your sense of self. It leads to this chronic self-doubt, a toxic kind of guilt where you feel responsible for their abuse, and what's called cognitive dissonance. That's the mental gymnastics of holding two opposite thoughts at once, like I love this person, and also this person is hurting me. It all just leads to complete emotional burnout, and over time, can even cause symptoms of complex trauma. And this brings us to the fundamental problem with this whole dynamic. It creates a closed loop where any kind of real resolution is just impossible.
Here's the bottom line. If one person in a relationship absolutely refuses to ever take responsibility, then no conflict can ever be resolved. Every single discussion just goes in a circle. It ends exactly where it began, but with one key difference. The abuser's sense of power gets a little stronger, and the victim's emotional resistance gets worn down a little bit more.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty sobering question. When a person's entire psychological defense system is built around pushing blame onto others to protect their own fragile ego, is real, genuine change ever truly possible for them? It's a question that really highlights the tragic, gridlocked nature of this devastating dynamic.